In the movie Ghost, Patrick Swayze's character named Sam Wheat never says the words "I love you" to his girlfriend Molly Jensen, played by Demi Moore. Sam always waits for Molly to say "I love you" first, and then responds with ditto. Now, as it turns out, this is a very common problem for a lot of people, and there are a lot of articles online written by psychologists and other experts about why people have issues saying those words, whether it be the vulnerability aspect, or in the case of men, the stereotypes about masculinity, or whatever. Now, personally, I can relate to this problem. You see, I grew up in a household that was very loving. I grew up in a household where there was no infighting, there was no drama, everybody always got along.
We all get along very well. She's very proud of that. We're not a family that ever fights. We don't, ever.
So what were your goals, what were your hopes, especially as immigrants, for your kids and for that next generation? What did you want for them?
Well, I just wanted them to have a good job and a good living, that's all. That's why we sent them to let them go to school and university and everything. So, and we're hoping that they would do well, because they were both smart, they could both learn well.
But the one thing that we weren't great at was expressing ourselves emotionally, expressing our feelings. The words "I love you" were not often said in my household. You would see it on a birthday card, you would see it on a Christmas card, Merry Christmas, love Mom and Dad, Happy Birthday, love Sheri. But we didn't actually say the words very often. And that actually stayed with me right up through my adult years, and it impacted some relationships, quite honestly. Even today, I'm married, and I rarely say the words "I love you" to my wife. And she's gotten quite used to it and doesn't say it back much anymore. I love her, and she loves me, but I just don't actually say the words very often. I have 2 young children, and even with them, you don't hear the words "I love you" from me very often, but many times, every single day, I say "Daddy loves you." Because for whatever reason, I don't know the psychology behind it, but for whatever reason, I'm comfortable with that, and so I always say "Daddy loves you" to both of them throughout the day. Now, along the same lines, whenever my family and myself would try to talk about my father's situation after he was diagnosed with cancer, we always would say, "If something happens to Dad." Even though we knew he was terminal and we knew what the end result was going to be, we would always say, "If something happens to Dad." That's just the way that we were comfortable talking about it, and that's just the way that we did things and said things. The point that I guess I'm trying to make is that when my father was diagnosed, I wasn't interested in seeing therapists. I wasn't interested in seeing counselors. I wasn't interested in talking to anybody about the situation and about what I was dealing with. I kept everything bottled up inside, and that's just what I was accustomed to, and that's just what I would do. And so that's why an unintentional byproduct, as I call it, of me producing a documentary about the lives of my parents was that it became my outlet. It became my way of coping with my situation. It became a way that I was able to talk about the situation, and I really found solace in producing that documentary. Fast forward to when my sister was diagnosed, and I again sought out an outlet. I again sought out something that would allow me to cope with the grief that I was dealing with, something that would allow me and help me to talk about the situation. Around that same time, I connected with an old friend from high school, and I discovered that her sister had passed away from cancer a few years earlier. Talking to her kind of made me realize that a lot of people go through exactly what I went through, or deal with other kinds of physical illness or mental illness or the loss of a loved one. And so that's what got me thinking, if I'm going to come up with an outlet to help me cope with the grief that I'm dealing with and to help me talk about it and to subsequently help with the healing process, maybe I can do something that can at the same time help others. And that is exactly where the idea for Grappling with Grief came from. If you are someone who is comfortable expressing your emotions and you're comfortable with therapy and you're comfortable with counseling, that's great for you. And at some point, Grappling with Grief hopes to work with therapists and counselors in order to provide these opportunities for people. But if you're like me, if you just always had a tendency to keep things bottled up, if you always had a tendency to not express your emotions very well, maybe there'll be something at Grappling with Grief to help. Maybe there will be something that you can relate to, and maybe you'll have a story that you'll want to share with us. Ultimately, I'm trying to help and I'm trying to inspire, and I hope that we can do that. P.S. to my wife, I love you.